Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Gasly Stamos from the Rounding Off Affinity Gaming channel on YouTube, the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, aka Game Logic on Twitch, back with another episode of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast. This is the GX show for June 2020, part 1. So we'll be talking about the games that we've been playing for the last 2 weeks, and then we will do the same thing again in 2 weeks at the bottom half of June. Here with me, as always, I have Osiris Prime. How you doing, Prime?
I'm all right tonight. Raring to get ready to talk about games.
All right, Swiss Guard.
I'm excited about your T-shirt. I approved.
And DBQ Hams.
Good to be here. Good to be with you, gentlemen.
Good. So let me first go ahead and get the first order of business out of the way. So we are recording tonight. A lot of podcasts are not. A lot of podcasts are on blackout. So let's very quickly address, to a certain extent, what led up to us broadcasting tonight. My key thing, at least as far as my input goes, and my input is not the final say by any means. It's not the way we run things. But my input was that I wanted to make sure that we had a good, robust, detailed discussion about whether we should podcast tonight or not. And so, as with all things, so that when we, whatever we do, that we make a conscious, aware decision about doing so. It gets really complicated when we talk about, all the conversations that we did have. So I don't think that I'm going to go through that. I will say, for my own part, at least as far as, my input, and I've been struggling with the decision even since we made it, right? And we made it about 2 days ago. We decided that we were going to go ahead and broadcast this week. Again, because we're the type of people who would make a decision like that well in advance and not at the last minute. At the end of the day, one of the two primary reasons I think that we're broadcasting, I elected, for my input to be that we were going to do this broadcast because it's an exercise of freedoms that I have. And I don't know that those freedoms would always be there, whether it's because of the health crisis that's going on or the political crisis that's going on. I made the input that I made because there's the possibility that at some point in the future I would not be able to do so for various reasons. I think the second reason that I think all of us are in agreement on, that a key reason why we are broadcasting tonight, is I would hope that what people take away from it is that for individuals who are from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different demographics, different educational backgrounds, different perspectives, even on technology and games, let me tell you, it's not all rose and tinted windows, right, in the Discord chat. We disagree on things. We challenge each other on things. We very firmly say, prove, your point. And we enjoy a debate. We encourage a debate from different perspectives. I would hope that what people take away from it is that four people with those differences decide to come together every week to have a discussion in the face of controversy, in the face of world events, in the face of things that quite honestly don't make me pleased. Right, the discussion of what's going on now, even back when it was just the health crisis, is this is a thing I don't get to take a break from, right? That is a discussion that happens in my house every day. I have to have very difficult conversations with my children as to what's going on. So, I think people from both sides would say that we shouldn't be broadcasting. Again, what I hope people take away from it is that we decided that this show is about fellowship and community and coming together. And I felt that it would be irresponsible for us to go silent in the face of what's going on. So, without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. And actually, I'm going to start it off. So I'll take a quick break and ask: is there anybody who wants to add anything to that before we get to going?
I'll just say, that's well said. We had a robust, I wouldn't even call it a debate, but it was a discussion, right? There wasn't necessarily arguments, because we all feel that there are important voices that need to be heard at this time. But your point in terms of us coming together because we can, and because we are from such a variety of experiences and backgrounds, that there is value in continued conversation and community. So I appreciate your words as well, Gascally. So thank you.
No worries at all. So we're going to go ahead and get things started with our discussion of the various gamer experiences that we've been having. Let's start off tonight with the report out on the Pix Plays. If you're not familiar with the show's format, for the gamer experience shows, what we do is we take an assignment that we craft before that show. We brief it and hand it out to all the co-hosts that are in attendance, as well as the ones who are not in the Discord chat. And then everybody over the following 2 weeks tries to incorporate that assignment into their normal gaming path. The assignment, the Pix Plays assignment, we call it the Pix Plays, for the last couple of weeks has been as follows. Fallout 76 recently went free to play for a weekend, so that was about a couple of weeks ago, in an effort to wash that bad taste out of gamers' mouths and try to onboard some paying clientele. Sometimes, in rare instances, games turn themselves around. Fallout 76 is not one of them, in my opinion. Revisit a game that had a stumbling launch, and then a lot of money and effort was thrown at it. Discuss whether it recovered or not, and if your feelings were the same or in opposition with the internet, both at launch and at the recovery point. DBQ, I will let you start us off tonight with your experiences recently in Battlefront 2 and Battlefront 5.
Yeah, so I dove back right into the loot box controversies and Hornet's Nest around EA. Battlefront 2 came out, 2017. Battlefield 5 was 2018. Obviously, there's plenty of knowledge, or at least awareness, of Battlefront 2 and its loot boxes and Disney and EA and all the other pieces related to that. 2 years on, 2.5 years on, earlier this spring, the Battlefront Twitter account and developers posted that they have released their kind of final major patch, that they are kind of content complete 2.5 years later. So I wanted to go back there and see if it was, they had already, when they had come back out and opened up the game in terms of opened up heroes and not had things gated behind loot box progressions and things like that. But gentlemen, this game it's just a complete Star Wars fan service in a meaningful and enjoyable way if you are a Star Wars fan. That there are you boot up the game, the sounds are all there, the sights are there, you can play big team battles, not big team battles, but the classic kind of battlefield type of conquest modes, and play them. You get to choose between which era you're playing in, right? Are you going to play in the prequel, the Clone Wars era? Are you going to play in the originals era with classic stormtroopers and new, and the Rebel Alliance, or are you going to go and play in the J.J. Abrams sequel era with the First Order? And all of those, I mean, each of them have the correct sights and sounds and appropriate heroes that you can play as if you've earned enough points in game through kills and objective plays. All of that is to say, it's a really complete game for Star Wars fans.
So one question I had. First of all, did I say it correctly? Because I realize now it says Battlefront 2 and Battlefield 5. I realized I was thinking Battlefield 2 and Battlefield 5.
You said Battlefront 2 and Battlefront 5, but that's okay.
Okay, all right.
Technically, yes, this could be Battlefront 5 because there was the PSP release and the DS release and.
So one question I had was, did you play through the single-player campaign in Battlefront 2?
I played through 2/3 of it. I eventually kind of stalled out, and this was my disappointment of the year. I had listened to the audiobook of the cast of characters that led up into the first player, the single-player story, and I eventually kind of stalled out in the single-player story. For the same reason that while I say that it is a great fan service of a game, I still don't enjoy it as a game because there's not a lot of complexity to the systems, right? That you're pretty much running forward, shooting at things. You're gonna, in the single player game, you hide behind stuff until you heal back up, and in the multiplayer game, it is a meat grinder of, there's a reason they unloaded so many clones and battle troopers, that you run forward, die, run a little bit more forward the next time. So no, I did not finish the single player campaign. It is production wise, it's great. Story wise, it's not bad. Production wise, it is top notch.
So in this revisit, had they done anything to? Because Prime and I played together before. Had they done anything to the? Right. So say what you will about Apex, and I don't personally like Apex. I feel like the loot grind is too long. The loot loop is too long, and the number of engagements that you get per match is too small and spaced out. But I appreciate what Apex does because it has a very specific design ethos oriented around forcing a gameplay framework that drives players to play together. And I think Battlefront 2 tried to do that with the way that you always spawned in squads, and they put an incentive system around that to encourage you to play together with whoever you spawn with. But have they done anything to tighten that up at all? Because everybody just ignored it.
They've pretty much just ignored it even further. Because originally, and even like a year after revisiting it, that you were still spawning in squads. At this point, you just respawn. You can spawn on people. You're not even necessarily choosing who you're spawning on. I don't know what I only played by myself, so I know that at one point in time in their roadmap, they had the ability that you could create your own squad, kind of like in classic Battlefield. But that kind of kept getting pushed back in the roadmap, and I don't know if that ever really came to fruition. They did add many other things in that roadmap in terms of kind of bot matches and ways to do kind of co-op modes with isolated maps and things like that, custom maps. But some of that I still don't know if they completed. So no, they didn't really do anything further to incentivize other than what they had originally.
A lot of the new J.J. Abrams stuff, did that get added recently, or was that in there from the get-go? Because I mean, I'm sure they probably added recent characters that were introduced, or.
So it launched with Rey and Finn and Kylo Ren. I don't know if they've added Poe. They've added a number of other kind of first order trooper characters, so you get kind of a more nuanced aspect there. They've added, when the first one launched, it had Jakku. They've added a few other maps. When Rogue One came out, that was one of the expansions for Battlefront 1, or at least the first Battlefront in the new era. Here, not so much. A lot of this is things that they already have had in terms of the new sequels, but one of the things that they've done is kind of gone back. They've added a lot more in the Clone Wars era. You got Clone Wars Anakin and Obi-Wan and General Grievous, and you got a number of those characters which weren't there prior to launch as well.
What era did you spend the most time in, real quick?
I played both. I played a little bit in all three, actually, in order to just kind of see how each of them felt. It doesn't necessarily feel drastically different. There's a different visual pass, but the engine, the systems and the mechanics are still relatively similar. So, a battle bot moves a droid. A droid moves a little differently than a rebel Wookiee, but otherwise they play pretty much the same. So I'm going to move on to. Go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please do.
For the multiplayer, did you play the multiple modes, or was it just basically like the Conquest Battlefield type of mode?
I played. For this pass through, I played just the Conquest mode. I have I think I've revisited this game maybe 4 times actually, because I picked it back up on PC at one point in time as well. So I've tried it in different modes. It did launch with a couple. It launched with modes, not as many as Battlefront from 2015, and then it continued to kind of add some back in. But I think, truthfully, I don't know what the player count looks like in some of those. So I tried to compare stick with some of the things I knew.
Okay.
And I'm just going to quickly jump into Battlefield as well, because again, being another EA property, man, this was a game that I really enjoyed Battlefield 1. You guys, multiple people on this podcast have talked about the war stories in Battlefield 1. Battlefield 5 launched with 3 war stories, kind of in that same mode. They were supposed to kind of continue some chapters. It's interesting that the engine in some of those, it feels not nearly as polished as the multiplayer. That the textures are a lot chunkier, and you can't get up close, and things start to look pretty pixelated.
Frostbite, or is it something else?
Oh yeah, it's Frostbite. Yeah, it's DICE.
Okay.
It's Frostbite. Battlefield 5 has, this summer they're coming out with their final update. They said this June they're coming out with their final update for Battlefield 5. Last year they came out with the Pacific expansion, and the Pacific expansion gives you a couple different maps for multiple different modes. Again, this is Battlefield, so you're playing Rush and Conquest, and you're playing, they've got a couple not war stories, but they've got a multi-stage kind of campaign piece, which feels kind of like a combination of multiple Rush maps kind of put together. It's Battlefield, right? I think it is relatively fine. I've played it since launch, kind of on and off, picked it up. It's stayed, it's been installed on my hard drive. I think the challenge is that it never, for me, it's always just been, right? It isn't as fast as Battlefield 4. It isn't as kind of unique with the World War I era guns is Battlefield 1. It is World War II. It's World War II a year after Call of Duty went to World War II. It had a challenge of timing. It had a challenge of kind of depth of content, and it really, within like the communities around it, certainly there are still a strong community, but it has not kind of grabbed on the same way as Battlefield. There's a reason that Battlefield 4 is still in the Battlefield launcher, even 6 years after its release. This is a game that still feels kind of maybe not fully optimized in terms of how long it takes to load into a game or transition from one game to another. It is not as long as it once was, but it is still there. It's a solid Battlefield experience. If you're playing in a squad, it is always, it's enjoyable. I still can play my role pretty well and play a medic and play the objective, but it just feels like a paint by numbers Battlefield in terms of it doesn't necessarily do anything new. One of the things that it tried to do at launch was to add in some of the building, like you could, create some barriers and throw down sandbags and do kind of almost a Fortnite type of building, but it was only in pre-designed designated spots, and it was relatively easily destroyed. And it doesn't feel like they've added a lot to it over the year, and that's kind of been, in some ways, it's the disappointment that Battlefront 2 isn't. Where Battlefront 2, they really stuck with it and made it this really comprehensive fan service, and Battlefield 5 feels like it's another DICE game, and I think it's not nearly as innovative or kind of pushing their tech or their genre forward as much as maybe fans might have hoped for.
Did you try the Battle Royale mode?
I have not tried the Battle Royale mode. Yes, that is true. They did launch last year. They launched the Battle Royale mode with a relative thud. Again, player counts are, you can't find them as easily as you once could for Battlefield games. They're still there. But at the same, it's interesting. Like looking at the player counts from what I could find, like online for the consoles, they're not drastically the difference between Battlefield 4 and 5 do not seem nearly as much as I would think, given the years of them.
Well, I'm gonna disagree with you from a taste setter perspective. I actually thought the war stories were better this time around. I know your opinion is not unpopular. Lots of people feel like the war stories. I guess I've chalked that up more so to the primary Battlefield community being primarily multiplayer players and kind of being impatient or losing tolerance for the second iteration of a single player campaign in Battlefield. We comment frequently about the fact that it's a hilarious state of affairs, just the interesting dynamic of, Battlefield, the game that historically started off as a multiplayer only, adding single player content, and Call of Duty taking it out. But I felt like the Battlefield 1 setup of like this guy who had lied his way into becoming a pilot, and then keeping that same character through like infantry battles and tank battles, and then the dirigible level. The dirigible level, I felt like it had jumped the shark at that point for me. But I felt like the Battlefield 5 war stories were a little more grounded in realism, with you switching characters. I really, really enjoyed from a historical perspective, really enjoyed the perspective of the tank squad in the final chapter. I guess that was one of the two that got added. It was a neat presentation of like the Nordic battle, but the skiing just kind of got on my nerves after a little while. It felt like a gimmick, since as far as I know, it's not present anywhere else in the game. But I really enjoyed the closing chapters of the Germans, and being presented with that notion of a scenario of like doggone well this thing, you're losing, and you're still being told to fight until the very end, and you're like, for what? Like, and why am I gonna? Sorry, spoilers. The game's been out for a while, but like why? But I'm gonna kill members of my tank squad for insubordination here, like when the Reich is falling down around my ears. Like, it was a very heart wrenching display, but I thought it was very cool. Anything else you want to add before we move on to the next?
No, I want to hear your.
Yeah, go ahead, Prime.
Sorry, DB. I just had a couple of things real quick. You were playing this on console, you said? And which one?
Yes, on Xbox.
Xbox, okay. And then the single player, was this an alternate reality story, or was it just normal world?
Historical based, yeah. It's a single
Okay.
player based in that, yeah.
Okay. For some reason, I was thinking it was like an alternate reality story. For some reason.
No, I don't think so. And I guess because I would say your points are very well made in terms of the story aspect of these, and I'm glad they've done them because it provides a little more historical context than simply just dropping you in a historical environment and having you run around for the sake of a multiplayer game.
That's not to say that I know that the story is historically accurate, because I didn't fact check it. But the tone of the scenario and the way it unfolded and the way they portrayed the characters felt like it rang true, or was at least similar to actual actual tales and anecdotal snippets that they had picked up from the era. So let's talk about a game that is definitely an alternate reality and not based on historical fact, and that was The Witcher 3. So I took creative license here to tweak my personal delve into this assignment a wee bit, and The Witcher 3 didn't necessarily have a rocky launch or a stumbling launch. It had a launch, but it definitely went through a resurgence and a re-exposure to many additional players with the advent of the Henry Cavill Netflix series, and you had a lot more players coming to The Witcher 3 and a lot of additional opinions that were rendered about it. It has maintained overall its appreciation and its zeitgeist within, I think, the gamer community writ large. I played it myself, and we can talk about stumbles coming after the initial launch and in its second launch. It's just different, and some of it is the difference in how I'm consuming games now, but I definitely found some what I felt like were weak spots within the game design that means it's a game for a particular type of gamer. And I would have to go back to the Game of the Year awards and things like that back when it launched, but it's not representative of a game that I would have ranked up. That's my favorite game of that year. I think it was a 2015 game. And it's had two major DLC things released and additional story content that's been released all along. It's a great value in terms of just hours and hours and hours of gameplay. It's a neat world. A few of the things that I realized in approaching the game and how the game has changed, because the point of this assignment was to talk about what was the game when it launched and how have things changed. A lot of my viewpoint is from the intervening 5 years in terms of how I have personally changed, how my perspective on games has changed, and kind of what our expectations are of a game along the way, as well as at the time. What's funny to me is this game releases kind of in the closing years of the Mass Effect franchise, and one thing that I can definitely say is I'm not super crazy. We go back to the Baldur's Gate engine type of games, which was my last real love for RPGs. I played fully through Icewind Dale and fully through Icewind Dale 2, in co-op with a good friend of mine. And one of the things that I used to always love back before he and I even started co-oping was I loved building a whole party. And, yes, in Baldur's Gate you had to take Minsc. I don't think in Icewind Dale you were forced to take any characters, but you were able to generate a whole party of additional characters and write their backstories and make all sorts of character choice selections. In Shepard, you were able to do similar acts, right? You were able to make some choices about who your Shepard was, and build your squad as you saw fit. I'm definitely more in that vein, and definitely find that more enjoyable than being locked into one singular character. I mean, everybody's Geralt was maybe a little different, but everybody played Geralt. And everybody existed in that world, and everybody kind of occupied the same space societally within that game and culturally. And that, to me, that's an RPG engine. It's an RPG engine that doesn't do some things that other RPG engines do. And so I feel like, from what I've read in the literature of Cyberpunk 2077, that's a little bit more in that vein of giving you choice and letting you occupy a different space in society as each person generates their character. It's an interesting take when we talk about how game design has evolved, and I realize now that I've always felt like Crapping's computer RPGs have been limited in the approach that degenerated the RPG element of them to dialogue trees, right? That was the only way to differentiate and really role play. And there was no enforcement of maintaining any consistency, and very rarely game systems that give you an incentive if you behaved consistently from character to character, from dialogue tree to dialogue tree. But with this playthrough of The Witcher 3, I also came to realize that there is this notion of kind of a closed loop RPG and a little bit more of an open world RPG. And that open worldness to me is that allowing you to occupy a different space in society. I realize that is difficult in terms of it's difficult to tell a story. It's probably more code in general because you wouldn't just be interacting with Yennefer, you would be interacting with who knows, right? When we talk about Mass Effect, and there are different romantic choices you were able to make. But there's definitely a lot more choose-your-own-adventure kind of aspect to the Mass Effect style than the approach on The Witcher. Other things that that kind of stuck in my craw from a design perspective up front is the tutorials seem kind of imbalanced to me, where I turn tutorials on. And tutorials are tough because I always have this problem with them where I want them on in case there's a 1 thing out of 10 that I just miss and there's no way that you get to it other than through the tutorial. But man, it's very heavily loaded. They put a lot of stuff on you. The other thing I really disliked is they tell you all sorts of stuff about riding the horse, which to me is fairly intuitive. It's better, in my opinion, than Red Dead Redemption 2's horse riding. they don't tell you that you could swim in the game in like the first hour, or at least I missed it. So one of the missions in the very early vestiges of the game tells you that you need to collect this herb or this plant that is on the shore. It's actually not on the shore. It's in the smack dab middle of the river, and you don't even know that you can swim. So I lost like maybe 30 minutes in a play session, like running around trying to understand, like, I kept going back and forth across the river, not understanding why, like, I didn't find where this thing was on the shore. And then I was like, finally, at the end of the 30 minutes, I was like, let me just try and swim. And it turns out that worked. And that was at the end of the night. And in fact, I was live streaming at that point. I turned the stream off. So I stayed up like an additional 30 minutes playing with it off stream just to get past that point. I really like the combat. It has its own style. It's a very Shadows of Mordor type of content. They don't have the Nemesis system, but the combat system is very similar. And there's also a bit of Far Cry 5. We all know how much I love that game. There's a bit of Far Cry 5 to it in that, the best way to progress through the game is to come up on an encampment and kind of get a survey of the land and stop a minute and think through, what is this encampment? What is the setup? What do I know? What do I don't know? If I said that correctly, what do I not know? And how do I mitigate and compensate for that? How do I manage risk? How do I go in and how do I take down enemies? One of the things I learned is that your wards or your glyphs or whatever, your magical spells, while your offensive ones may seem very powerful and the direct route to take enemies down, it's actually throwing enemies into a daze, which is one of your early powers that you get. It's actually one of the most effective because you're basically able to execute them as long as they're dazed. Like it's like 2 hits and they're down. So it's actually more effective. The other thing that I came to really dislike, and this hits in the realm of what Swiss was talking about last week when he talks about inexcusable kind of software glitches, I think the thing that I found most aggravating was that, 4 years, 5 years after the game's launch, there are missions in the game that, let's say there's 10 steps to the mission. The steps have to be done in a very specific order in order for the mission to be completed. However, it is feasible for you as a character and for your in-game avatar to discover elements of step 5, right, and to take action on them despite that fact. Like, they're revealed, they're not hidden. If you break that chain of events, it makes it, in-game, it makes it impossible to complete the mission. The only way I was able to complete it was I dug into the FAQ online, and I dug into Reddit, and I dug into, like, all these people who had encountered this problem, and figured out how to get through it. And then even then, some of it was trial and error. There's a lot of event triggering in this game, which I realized, like, I'm really not a huge fan of. The event trigger methodology of getting a mission to unfold just creates some problems, and it's fine if you approach the game entirely symmetrically, but if there's any asymmetry involved in it, or asynchronicity, I should say, in terms of doing a step out of sequence, the mission can become broken. In this particular case, I was the mission was taking down a Noon Wraith. I hadn't been exposed to that name beforehand. When I heard it, I had no written literature on it. I heard it verbally at one point after I'd done a step out of sequence. It didn't click with me that Noon Wraith actually meant noon. So the only time that the monster presents itself is if you're standing there at noon. So, multiple ways, I ran into problems with the game. It's a game that I will nibble at. It is not the overwhelming, out-of-the-box, wondrous experience that I think that game has associated with it in its thought in the gaming community, and therefore is the proof of the ramp into Cyberpunk 2077. I've seen enough of The Witcher 3 that I hope that Cyberpunk 2077 is a radically different game in terms of design than The Witcher 3 was.
It's a little disappointing because it's in my backlog. I played some of the original Witcher and fell off of it, but I've always been told that they get better with each sequel, and The Witcher 3 is supposed to be, a generational type experience. But on the other hand, and this is me maybe trying to be optimistic for my playthrough, I get a lot of sense in your initial description. I get a lot of sense that you might have viewed this game as a Western RPG, just given the skin. Like it's very D&D-esque, right? That universe, but with the locked-in character stories, I guess you could say, and the narrative. I know it's not like a JRPG, but those elements strike me as more Japanese RPG-esque, and I know that that's never been your cup of tea. So, is it just? Do you feel like your expectations were subverted, or, did that process go through you? Like, this is not as Western as I thought it would be.
No, that didn't so much. That was more of a realization that I made in terms of what would attract me to a game. Just in terms of how I would compare two RPGs to each other. Much more so of this, so that's almost like a side note. Much more so, my discovery in playing through this was about, great Scott, how can something like asynchronously completing a task 5 years after a game's release still be a bug? Like that mission that I went through, which happens to be the first side mission that I did, right? So I did some. So no, my problem was with pacing. I would say more so. Yeah, I mean we know that I have a short tolerance for pacing. It may be the shortest in the group. I don't know. But I spent the first 2 hours. I was involved in 2 fights that entire time. One of those I wouldn't even call a fight. It was like a bar fight scuffle that got initiated that you didn't have any choice about. Like it just happened. You didn't have any choice to de-escalate it or walk away or anything. You were just forced into it. You didn't really have an ability to use your powers. It was in a very tight and closed space, so you hadn't even really been exposed to the combat system yet. So that was it. And then it was so total, it was probably about 8 hours into the game before I really started nailing down like how I was going to approach the game versus, say, Far Cry 5, where I hit the realization at maybe the 2 hour point that I was like, hey, you need to stop dorking around, getting involved in every little happening that you happen to pass by, and be very deliberate about how you're going to go around the map and make progress. So it's just very slow in its presentation and its consumption. The being locked into a single player, yeah, you're absolutely right. It definitely is more akin to Eastern design influences. But I didn't consider that a showstopper. It was just, if I had 2 RPGs, which would I pick? And a comparison of if these 2 RPGs came out in a given year, which one would I consider the more elegant design? This was more so definitely about the pacing, some of the things that they left you subject to that I felt were unnecessary, and some of the things that were still broken, multiple years after the game's launch. So if we have no further questions, I will go ahead and try and burn through and catch up here on some time. So that completes the Pixpace assignments. Prime and Swiss were not able to get to it in the last couple of weeks. Another thing that I played, so we're now into the regular gaming experience rundown. First game up, we'll go through the first-person shooter section of the games that have been played over the last few weeks. I played Metro Exodus on Stadia. This game is also on Game Pass. I forget the name of the studio, but essentially think of them like Crytek in terms of the pride they have in the game engine that they render, how exacting they are in detail, how dripping this is with graphic content. Again, I talked about Metro 2033 Redux being the thing that broke me from playing on consoles. 99% certain, again, I'm forgetting the names, that was not them, the same development studio who did the port to Nintendo Switch. I'm pretty sure that was outsourced.
It was outsourced.
Okay.
A4 Games is the original developer.
Okay.
And they were outsourced.
Okay. Metro Exodus is pretty wonderful. The first 2 games are very slow-paced and methodical. This is a little more kind of a Jerry Bruckheimer type of game in terms of pacing and whiz-bang, action-oriented sequences. I'm not going to get into the story and give things away because the game just came out last fall. But let me tell you, there's a twist. There's a very M. Night Shyamalan kind of twist to it, which I found very refreshing. The story has always been there. Again, the games are based on an eloquent set of books that were written, I think, by a Russian author. But it's always been kind of slow, methodical, plotting, pacing. I feel like the person who wrote this book, was somebody who's, thinking more Tolstoy than The Rock. But let me tell you, Metro Exodus, gets started right off the bat. I think this is the first game. I haven't played that much of the second one, Metro Last Light. I think this is the first game that you play significantly with the wife of the protagonist, but she is very prevalent in the first few chapters in the game. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, sorry. So this is the type of game that you kind of have to play some of the previous titles before you jump into this one?
No, I would jump right into that. I've torn off that Band-Aid. I've spent decades refusing to play a game until I played. Life's too short. I would just recommend going into this. It's probably the most performant from a graphical perspective and the most tolerant of differing sets of hardware. At least in the first few hours that I played, it was not as punishing and grueling as the first two were. Maybe that I picked a different difficulty level in this one because I'd played significant amounts of the first two. I knew that picking the highly realistic settings was very stingy with regards to ammo, and I didn't have the tolerance for that. But you get a lot of very action-oriented set pieces in this up front, and you get to the ripping the blindfold off moment in the story campaign at a point that keeps it moving and keeps it interesting. It's not right away. I played several hours of this on Stadia, but it was the most enjoyable of the Metro series games that I had played to date in the first few hours. And I will also say, probably one thing that also lent to my enjoyment as well, I know Prime is very good about going in and tweaking his controller settings on console, before he gets too far into a game. That is something that I typically tend not to do. So I struggle with, the latency of, the controller throughout a bunch of the game and complain, but I never take the time to sit there and try and dial it in. The calibration settings on this are really good. There are several profiles included out of the box with the game. I pretty quickly found one that locked in. Again, Stadia maybe technically... the jury is still out on whether or not you consider Stadia a console or Stadia just Linux gaming on PC. But I was playing this on my 4K television with the controller through the Chromecast Ultra. Again, have it playing now over a wire now that I realized the Chromecast Ultra has a wired Ethernet port. Had a great time with it, quickly dialed the controller settings in. Good story, good graphics. Didn't have problems with the Stadia service. Had a great time. So Prime, you played a shooter that I would claim is not as grounded in realism. Tell me about your experience with Warzone over the last couple of weeks.
So I started playing this again. I actually had a friend of mine I hadn't talked to for a while, just kind of, drifted apart. Life happened. And we started talking again, and he was asking me what I'd been playing. So he said, so I was saying, Fortnite and Rocket League and all this other stuff, and he was asking me about Warzone. I was like, oh yeah, I play it every once in a while. I kind of fell off of it actually, just because I didn't have anybody to play with that I could actually talk to, because obviously nobody ever talks anymore when you go online if you're doing just randoms. Unless you're in a party or something. So we started playing. This was actually a cross play. Which is another reason I wanted to bring this up, because he plays on the PC, and I play on the Xbox One. So we did that. Playing the actual game is fine together. I didn't really see any problems when we were playing, like lag or anything like that. We had it every once in a while, but I think that was just network stuff that happens. But boy, that party system, something to be left desired there. And not so much the well, the party system too, and then just the audio quality when you're in that party. And I don't know, I'm assuming it's because obviously, I'm an Xbox, he's on PC. You know, the first couple of times we tried to play, I couldn't even get it. We couldn't get it to work through the game, so we had to use Discord, which is fine. I mean, I've done that before with plenty of other games, even with the people here on in the podcast. But finally, I was able. I had I looked through, like we all do. I looked through Reddit, looked through YouTube, looked online, Google. Finally found the reason. It was you just have to tweak a bunch of stuff. And once again, I think it's just because of the cross-play aspect of it, which is fine. I mean, at least we can actually play together. If push comes to shove, once again, we'll just drop to Discord. But it was a fun time. It's actually nice to be able to talk to somebody, especially somebody going through a game like this. Didn't get any wins, but we got pretty close a few times. So when that's a lot better than I do by myself when I'm just playing with randoms. So I was actually enjoying it. We've been playing off and on for the last couple of weeks, so it's been a really great experience. And say something else now. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, we're gonna continue to play that for now. And we were actually thinking of maybe jumping into PUBG, but I gotta look into that one to see if you can even do anything like that, because you can play cross-play people, with people, but I don't know if you can do if there's like a party system within the game or not. So I'll have to check up on that. So Gascleed, if you ever want to play, I'm there, because I know you play on PC.
Yeah, just let me know. I would probably insist that we use Discord, but for comms,
yeah.
But, just because it tends to be less problematic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be down. Again, Warzone, not my favorite of the battle royales. I'd probably be more interested in playing Fortnite. I say that because I know that you play Fortnite.
Yes.
But I'm down for whatever. Let's go ahead and hop over to talk a little bit about Destiny 2 on PC. Jet Force Vela, Swiss's significant other, actually commented, because I guess she saw some of my gameplay right before the podcast, and it's been interesting because over the last 2 days I've had different experiences. The first one was very akin to what it in my mind is the Destiny experience, which is this unspoken brotherhood of guardians in game, regardless of what platform you're playing on, and regardless of the presence of comms or not. People would just go along with you, and if you're in a strike, would actually play the strike. Whereas today was very much kind of the same thing that I was accustomed to in Destiny 2, which is you go into a strike with people either take off and completely just blow through resistance as you're playing the game. They just don't even bother fighting any of the fights on the way to the boss. They're just sprinting through, trying to get to the boss as quickly as possible. Or they just go off and start exploring and aren't even on the mission objectives like they're supposed to be. So you wind up thoroughly wasting your time. You get jammed into a strike that's supposed to take 3 people, and you wind up playing the thing by yourself and getting trounced. Now, I will say what I do like in Destiny 2, and I don't think it was there in Destiny 1, is that there's a join anytime effect in the matchmaking engine in strikes. So now you could be at endgame. Yesterday, thank goodness, there were 2 of us who had been going through the strike. We were at endgame for the strike. We were fighting the final boss. Literally, I got killed off. I don't know if I had been the last Guardian standing or if the other guy, but we were about to lose the thing, and a third guy hopped in at the last second and revived me, and we were able to complete the mission. So it was pretty cool. But it's just weird and janky in terms of you always worry when you're playing through the strike and you get to that final boss and both of you wind up dead, because quite honestly you don't know if the other person's going to jump back into the strike or if they're just going to bounce. So today, the strike today, I didn't have any consistency with the people I was playing with until halfway through the strike, and then I got 2 players into the strike that stuck with it to see it through the end. But it's really disappointing to start the strike with 1 person and play halfway through and then lose them. Even if you the experience you've had playing with them up until then, and then they just bounce. One thing I don't like is I realized tonight that you get into the strike, and after the strike is done, if you don't go to orbit manually on your own, it just jams you back into the wait loop for the same strike over again, which is unpleasant. But
It's not the same strike. It's just into the queue for whatever. You may have randomly pulled the same strike.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Yeah, well, I was on Mars, so there are only 2 strikes on Mars, so, maybe it keeps you on the same planet, and that gave me only a 50% chance that I wasn't going to get the same strike. One thing that's different now is as I delve a little bit more into this persistent play games in my playlist, is tonight is the first night that I've ever really been I hate to use the term invested, but I've actually spent any time in the grind loop of Destiny. I have only really been a story player, and essentially what I do is I go in, I play whatever the story is. I don't do a lot of random missions, and I don't hunt. I don't hunt bounties. I just don't. I get bounties, and if I happen to complete them at random in the course of playing through the story content, then great. But never do I pick up a bunch of bounties and then go, oh, I need to complete this bounty tonight. Today, I will say, while I'm a very story-oriented player, which I would call mainstream, my weird predilection is that I insist on having shaders. So I was short on shaders after the end of last night. I was like, how do you get shaders? I thought you would just go to Tess Everest and just buy shaders. I don't think that's how it works. I think there's a person in the tower that sells them. I don't know if I've... Yeah, go ahead.
Guy.
What's that?
The Cryptarch guy that decodes the Prime Ingrams has a handful of shaders that you can buy, I think.
Yeah, so, yes, and he may have a handful. It turns out they're actually just in collections, so you can go rebuy any that you've already acquired, but they cost Glimmer. So then I went down the path, so after doing all that research, then I went down the path of, what's the quickest way to grind Glimmer? Well, the solution that I'm on, there's several. The solution that I'm on right now is going and trading with Spider, who is a character that I'm not particularly crazy of because of the grindiness of the front end of the Forsaken DLC, which I kind of bypassed. I skipped over it, and now I'm playing the Shadowkeep DLC. But I am trading with Spider to try and get Glimmer. I went through a couple of those do loops this morning to try and get myself set up, and that's what I went in with tonight. I think I was down to I went ahead and bought some shaders and was down to a very small amount of Glimmer, maybe 500 something. I built back up, bought 10 instances of shaders, and then continued on tonight over playing for a very short amount during the day, and then tonight's hour and a half-ish session, I've made 40 grand in Glimmer, so I'm good. So I bought 10 of one type and then 10 of a bunch of different types, and I realized I need to train myself out of automatically always applying shaders to every single piece of gear that I get and that I'm using. So being a little less OCD about that, but I had a good time. What I don't like still, even though I'm acclimated to the notion of the grind in Destiny 2, I don't like when the story DLC forces you to grind. I get it. If they didn't pack that into Forsaken and into the front end of Shadowkeep, I would never play bounties. But it still bothers me to be forced to complete a bounty to progress the story-based DLC. I'm like, just give me a target, give me a white pointer that tells me where it is, and let me go deal with it. So there we are. Swiss, you also have been playing some Destiny 2?
I kind of decided to just tail end off of yours, because Destiny 2 is something that I'm pretty much playing multiple times every week, and Glimmer acquisition is not a problem for me. So I mean, you just kind of outed yourself as a Destiny 2 phony by saying that you don't have enough Glimmer to. But yeah, the strikes, when I first started playing, I didn't know. You don't know what the strike is, and that was a real problem because somebody'd race ahead, and then it starts rubber banding you through the level, and you're like, where did he go? Where am I supposed to be? And then you're warping forward. It's frustrating. So
you also lose weapons when you warp. So at one point I had the Valkyrie and I got warped ahead, and when I reappeared I did not have the Valkyrie. So that's also an issue.
So we try to, when we're playing a strike, if we can tell that the person is new, we try to slow down. And you can usually tell by their gear and whatnot. And I know we had one fellow, we were doing a strike, and they just disappeared. And we're like, they're way back there. I don't know it. So we just stopped. We just waited. They came. They could see where we were. Didn't know quite how to get there. I came down and guided them up, and they played the rest of the mission with us. And it was a nice. I felt like I did my nice Destiny good deed. But yeah, I tried a little bit to be considerate, but I kind of want to loop back on something that both you and Prime said, and this will be my little bit of a Destiny 2 spiel, and then we can move on. Someone playing with someone I would not play Destiny nearly the significant amount of time that I played it if my wife wasn't playing it with me. And it's pretty much right now, yeah, it's a grind. And kind of when we get on, we're like, all right, we got to do these few things. Okay, we can play some Gambit and get those bounties. We can play this strike and get that. And so that's how we plan the evening, or like the little 45-minute game session that we'll have. And try to hit those things, then we bounce off. But it's much more enjoyable playing with a friend. I can't imagine doing grinds solo. Like, I just can't. Like, we kind of got through a lot of we did what you did, which is just story missions, plow through, enjoyed that, and then you run out of it. So, yeah, and the problem is they keep adding new content. Like, we get new seasons, but like you referenced with Forsaken, which at least had some story elements. You referenced with Shadowkeep, which had limited story elements. It's getting worse, and I mean, I'm not the first person. DB's talked about it a lot to say that it's getting a little bit too grindy. This current season is nothing but grind. But again, I enjoy playing it. With my wife, like we enjoy playing through the mission, like just playing together. Like that's the enjoyment factor for us. Like the game mechanics are good enough to where getting in a party or a fire team can kind of overcome the tedium a little bit that some of it can have.
Yeah, I mean, there's as always, there's definitely that element to like figuring out how you're going to play a game, and my thing is, as you mentioned, like I just wasn't. It's a weird thing because it's a new thing to consider. Again, I've historically been the one and done gamer, right? Like I pay for the thing, I play through it, and then I'm either done with it and I put it in the backlog and I revisit it, but I don't revisit it for the purpose of progressing a character, right? And that's it's what Destiny 2 is, and it's kind of a what else are you going to do when you make a thing that was an action adventure game now an MMO. Because you have to have that grind loop. It's kind of an inherent design element. And so, the grind, as you mentioned, as they've gone on from season to season, the grind has become more prevalent because that's what an MMO is. Whereas with World of Warships, I don't have a problem absorbing that because it was on the front end of what it was and how I approached the game, whereas it hasn't been that with Destiny 2. So yeah, it'll be interesting to continue plowing through it. We had a bunch of people play a game that is it from the first person perspective or is it from the third person perspective? Third? Okay. Yep. But still, it's an effort to, I would say my impression, so tell me if I'm wrong, that's part of your discussion, is to twist a game into more of a progression, action, adventure, Diablo, accomplishing objectives type of gameplay. And so DBQ and Prime had an opportunity to play Minecraft Dungeons. Swiss, I also want you to jump in on this and just talk us through, even if it's very quickly, why you didn't or why you were not able to, because I know you mentioned that you had some problems getting into it before.
I own it on Windows. I have not played it because I bought it for the express purpose of me and my kids and my kids together playing co-op. Like, it was specifically purchased. Like, they're Minecraft fans, but we like playing co-op games together. And on the PC, that is still broken. And there's an open bug, which is number 1230, I know it on the Mojang bug list because I check it every couple of days to see if it's been updated. And it's a known issue where the family family sharing doesn't work with Minecraft Dungeons. And family sharing is I have my Xbox account, Microsoft account, whatever. It's one and the same thing. My kids have theirs. They are in my family group. Therefore, if I buy a game, they can log in as themselves and play it simultaneously. That's how we play Minecraft. And for whatever reason, it doesn't support it. They've recently updated the FAQ to say at this time it's not support. Family sharing is not supported in Minecraft Dungeons on PC. And I don't know if that means it's going to come soon and they're just trying to put that out there, but it's been relatively quiet as far as them acknowledging that it's a problem, and it's kind of frustrating given that it is a Minecraft game. It's going to be kid-centric, and most of the comments on this bug are parents being like, hey, I bought this to play with my kids. Why can't they play it? So that's my status right now.
Well, let's go with something a little more uplifting. DBQ, you had a chance to play it on Xbox One, which is interesting. And Prime, you played it on both Switch and Xbox One. So I would be interested to hear if there's a silver lining to this story.
Yeah, so would I. I'd be interested to know if there's a silver lining as well. So my answer to Swiss would be, you're playing the right Minecraft. Continue to do what you're doing. Don't feel too bad about missing this. And maybe that is too judgmental too quickly. I have played it with couch co-op with my two sons. I have played it single player. It is exactly the Minecraft that on paper I want. I have never been a big Minecraft fan. I want objectives. Dragon Quest Builders was great because it gave me objectives in this type of a world. I love Diablo and Torchlight and the Marvel Heroes game that was Diablo Marvel, right? I mean, I'm a loot guy, right? I'm wearing a Destiny shirt. I'm okay with the grind. Here, the grind is kind of interesting. I mean, it is on normal difficulty, and I'll be curious, Prime, on your impact in your take on this as well, your input. On normal difficulty, I can plow through a level just fine, without a whole lot of difficulty, until I get to a boss, and then the boss of a couple different levels that we've done already can really, really tax you. And so I'm either under leveled at that point, but at the same time, I just breezed through the outer world, the overworld, until I got to the boss. But the bosses can really be taxing. Even when I was playing couch co-op with my sons, with three of us, we could down the boss pretty quickly because there were enough of us that kept dying and respawning that we could stay in the battle. Playing solo, it was a little more difficult. The loot is good. The loot's kind of fun. It's got great charm. It is in that Minecraft world, right? The graphics are nice and fine. It's not a really fast game. It doesn't have the speed of Diablo, both in terms of the attacks and kind of the character movement, but it's got, you have your pets like you would in Minecraft. Your armor is Minecraft related. You get enchantments on things. It is playing in that world really well. It probably is a really good intro action RPG. But even my sons who are not big Diablo fans, they found it kind of slow and boring as well. But they're high schoolers, so Prime, you've got somebody who's not a high schooler in your household. How was that family experience?
Yeah, my son's in elementary school still, so I mean he's not as old as your son's obviously, but he actually loved it. I think he had heard about it from a friend, because I didn't even mention it. I hadn't mentioned it to him yet. and he was when I told him about it, he's like, oh, he was really excited to play it, and we've actually been playing it. I played with him just once so far, which is him and I, or myself and him. Sorry, can't talk today. And then, but most of the time I've been playing with him and my wife too. We've all three of us been playing. And you're correct about the difficulty level spikes like dramatically with the bosses. The first boss we went up against, we couldn't even beat it just because it was punishingly hard, even from solo. From when I had done the that same boss in solo mode.
Do the bosses scale in multiplayer? So is the same boss more difficult when more players are involved?
I'm trying to think because I played the solo mode quite a while ago. There seemed to be something. There was one thing that happened in the boss fight that we did together that I didn't see when I was playing by myself. It was the cauldron one. DB, I don't know if you did that one with the witches.
Which one? Yeah. Oh, I hated that boss. Yes.
Yeah. So when we played together, there was an extra like enemy or some effect or some kind where it would like turn night or for something, or like these like winged creatures would start like just like dive bombing you and like really like just destroying your health. And I didn't see that at all when I was playing solo, and I actually did that twice, basically because I didn't realize it doesn't save like in the middle of a level when you're in it. You just start back from the beginning if you happen to quit out of a level. So I did that twice, and I was like, wait a minute, this is different. And I didn't beat it easily, but I was able to, you can kind of hide behind stuff, at least in that boss. So I was able to just do that and get my health potion to regenerate, and then I just kept doing that. So it took me a little bit longer. But actually, when I was doing it with my family, we still haven't beat it yet. We've probably done like 2 other levels, I think, after that. So we just had to go back. We could probably go back and do it pretty easily now because we're it's powered up. That's the one thing I kind of like. It kind of tells you like, this level's power level 1 or 2, 3, whatever number it is, and this is your level or team level, depending on if you're playing with multiple people. So that's kind of nice. 'Cause you kind of know, hey, we could probably do this. But even with that, I think we were at the same level for that one when we did it the first time, and we just got destroyed. So it does ramp up big time with the bosses. But no, but yeah, we're definitely having fun with it. I've played Diablo 3. And that's pretty much. I guess I've played the Marvel games too. I like those back in the day, and even with the more recent one, even though that one's not really looty as the previous ones. So I've kind of played those types of games before. So it's fine with me. I'm not too hard on it for like the kind of the beginner. Here's your introduction to that type of gameplay. So it's not too bad for me. But I like the Minecraft aesthetic and just enemies, and there's new enemies that they throw in there, which is kind of cool. The loot's pretty interesting. Some of the things, sometimes they give you kind of like a basic description when you first get something, but then when you actually go into your inventory and look at it, it's like, oh, okay, that's what this thing does. So it's kind of cool to pick this stuff up. Now, gameplay wise, or just kind of the game as it runs, in and itself. Xbox One, I haven't played with my family yet. I've just done that one solo. We played on the Switch. A little slowdown on the Switch version. Even when I was playing solo, there's like weird times where I'm like just moving through the level. No, like very minimal to no enemies on the screen, and I would kind of just stutter around a little bit. So I was like, that's kind of weird. I've actually seen that on the Xbox too, but not as often. But definitely more on the Switch when I've played it. It's not terrible for me. So I could play through it. But you definitely notice a lot more when you have more people in there. And like I said, we just had 3. I think you can do 4. Is that right, DB?
Yeah, I believe it's 4-player. Yep.
4-player. Okay, so we've only done 3. So, but there's definitely some slowdown when in certain parts here and there. Like I said, even that was kind of random. Like sometimes it would just happen with a few people on screen or enemies. Other times, if it was like the Witch one would get pretty stuttery at points here and there because there was like a ton of things going on at the screen.
There's a lot going on the screen. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the only boss I've seen actually so far. And there's like those mini bosses, but like big boss, that's the only one I've seen. So I don't know how if that ramps up later on, if we get even more people, monsters or whatever on screen. So there's definitely a performance difference between the two. But I still have fun on the Switch. I was gonna buy it on the Switch, originally anyways, and obviously I have Game Pass, so I wanted to kind of get that comparison to see how it was. So, and it's Minecraft graphics, so it's not not the prettiest game, but I mean, it's still kind of cool just to kind of see that environment in a different way.
I think it is a relatively pretty game. I mean, for what it is, the graphics within the aesthetic that it has are really, they're nice. They're like the swamp one that you were talking about with the witches. There's the different shades of green, and and light hits things in different ways. They've put effort into this. It's a sound game. So it's fun to hear that you're enjoying it. So I'm glad.
I get the sense from you guys' comments, and this is me kind of spitballing and reading into it. Again, I haven't played it yet, but this is a developer that was attempting to go out of their comfort zone design-wise, and we're seeing some of the limitation or some of the inexperience come out. Was that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would think so, because I mean, I think they've only done like one other game, I believe, which I don't think I think it was released, but then it was kind of just, I don't know, left out to die, or I don't know what happened to even happen. I think it was a card game or something.
Strategy card game. Yep, I remember that. Yeah. Yep.
So I mean, they've pretty much been doing just Minecraft, proper this whole time. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't have a problem with that. And to be honest with you, I didn't even think about that. I just never, I don't know why, I just never crossed my mind. But yeah, I can definitely see that's where some of these glitches and kind of slowdowns and stuff might be happening. Because I don't see why this game couldn't run smoother on the Switch. I mean, it's not, I mean, the graphics, yeah, they do look pretty good, and they're not like ugly or anything, but it's not super graphic intensive, and it's not like you're tearing apart the world like you would in Minecraft proper. So I don't know.
So
maybe they should have to optimize it.
So Swiss, do you? And I'm not asking this to put you on the spot. But have you had a chance to step up to an RTX card yet?
Yeah, I have an RTX 2070 Super.
Okay, good.
I got that back in.
So what?
The last summer.
So if and when you are able to play Minecraft Dungeons, I would like to hear the performance comparison, since you'll be playing with ray tracing turned on. That's the one positive note that I take away from this whole thing is thank goodness that this thing is out, so I can stop hearing about ray tracing being implemented on a Minecraft game every day on social media.
DB, you have an RTX card though, don't you?
Yes, I do, but I was playing it. I haven't played it on PC yet. So.
But you should have access to it. Do you have or do you not have the Game Pass Ultimate?
No, I do. I just haven't downloaded it for. Yep.
We have multiple people that could test this theory out.
I could test it out myself if I wanted to, but I choose not to.
And there is no cross save as far as I can tell. Like I played it on the Xbox. I played on the Xbox first, and then when I was playing with my family,
there is cross save within the Microsoft infrastructure. So if you're on PC and you're on Xbox,
okay,
it's cross save. But no, not for
Switch
or
cross play.
Yeah,
cross save, not cross play.
Both are true. That there's cross play.
Yeah, not on the Switch though, which is weird because Minecraft is cross save. Like I had a bunch of skins and like mods from the Xbox that I had bought, or that they just came out free, and when I went over to the Switch, they came over. Other than like the Microsoft centric ones like Halo or something like that, and even those came over eventually. Then I can actually use Halo on the Switch. But yeah, for some reason it didn't work, which is not a big deal because I actually have two different saves on the Switch. I started another solo game on there, and I use a completely different character than I do when I play with my family, just to to see the difference. And I think there's a little difference like on the kind of weaponry you get when you choose the different people, and the I think the enchantments too that you can put on there. So I just found that out. So that's cool.
Well, Prod, let's keep you on the mic and let's chug through our action adventure section here with both you and DBQ and talk to us a little bit about you about Hero Land and DBQ about Bug Fables, both on the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, so Hero Land is I saw this game on one of my Twitter feeds. It was actually a deal on Amazon for the like the special edition. Basically, it came in, with like a CD and like a little like kind of bag, kind of like almost like a money bag type of thing. Just some other things like art and stuff, and it was pretty cheap. I was like, oh, okay, this looks kind of cool. I haven't really bought any special edition stuff in a while. It was an RPG, but not the RPG I thought it was going to be. So this kind of revolves around that you're a guide at an amusement park where you kind of LARP basically. So you bring in the guests and then you take them on an adventure, to defeat this big bad of the game. So when you're actually playing the game, you don't control the players directly, more or less. So you kind of just pick your party. It's a party of 3, I believe, or at least right now it's a party of 3. I don't know if it gets larger later on. And you're kind of just your main character is kind of just sitting in the background, and you watch the people. They just do the thing automatically. Every once in a while, you can jump in and say, "Hey, I want this person to this person heal this person, or this person block, or this person attack a certain person here." But you can only do that like once you do that once. Then there's like a cooldown period, and you got to wait for it to build back up, and then you can do it again. Most of the time, at least for right now, because I just started, I've only played it for maybe a couple hours right now. I probably only have to jump in there like a couple times just to like heal people because they start to get beat down pretty badly. But it was definitely different than I thought it was, and just the graphics is kind of like they kind of look like cardboard cutouts almost. They're kind of like flat basically, and when they move, they kind of just like flip around like that. So it's not like a full 3D.
They're not like animated, but they're more pixelated.
No, it's not pixelated, but it's just like almost like they're static. And they they just kind of sit there like that. So they kind of just like flip back and forth like a card, like if it was just like a cardboard figure of something cut out. And that's how the whole it's kind of like an artsy motif, kind of like some of the Nintendo games have been. And actually, when we were talking earlier before the show, when you mentioned Paper Mario, that was kind of what was reminding me of that kind of graphics. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of cute, kind of cute little game. Nothing, there's not like blood and guts and stuff like that. So, and this is the publisher is Xseed Games. They make a lot of JRPGs and stuff like that. The developer is. Sorry, go ahead.
I was saying that as far as the gameplay, where you said they kind of just do what they do, is a little bit of the strategy involved in kind of arranging your unit and maybe like making sure they're equipped properly and having the right mix of unit of characters, or
yeah. So right now I only have I think 4 different people that I could choose from, which I can only bring 3 right now. Like I said, I don't know if that goes up in number later on, but yeah, it looks like there's more people that you'll be able to eventually get into your party, or at least pick from. And then, there's the healer and there's the fighter and the spellcaster and stuff like that. So it was cool. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't know. When you said that, I kind of started to get vibes from and I'm gonna go way back. Ogre Battle 64, Person of Lordly Caliber, and if you played that one, it's like Final Fantasy Tactics, but you don't command them. You kind of set up the units and they do that. It's kind of like they just have their automatic attacks that flow through. So I liked it. So that actually perked my interest on this one.
It's definitely something different than what I usually play. Even I don't mind regular JRPGs and stuff like that, and that's what I kind of thought it was going to be. But when it turned out to be this, I was like, oh, okay, it was kind of weird, and just kind of the storyline is just kind of interesting that you're for right now, and I'm thinking later on maybe you have to actually go against the real big bad, but this is just a theme park, and you're just guiding these people through these through these adventures. So, but we'll see what happens as I play through. But yeah, I'm having fun with it.
All right, well, I'll go from one Paper Mario reference to another, and Bug Fables is Paper Mario. It is my favorite new game of the year so far. I'm 5 or 6 hours in. It is just full of charm. It has a reasonably complex or strategic battle system without necessarily feeling kind of oh as gimmicky or experimental as the Nintendo Paper Mario series has been in the last couple iterations. Right, this feels like fans who loved Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, and decided what more could we do with the battle system within that type of genre. It is you are a bunch of bugs. You're a bee and a beetle and a moth. You are moving through a bug kingdom of different varieties. The bad guys are wasps. You're in the ant kingdom. You're in the bee kingdom. There's a bunch of flower. I mean, there's a lot of kind of puns in it. It's got good writing and humor. There's some actually the story. My son and I are playing it together, and we're neither one of us we're kind of passing back the controller back and forth, but both of us are into the story as well. It's not superly complex, but there's some nuance there. You can kind of there's a little bit of telegraph of I bet that person turns bad, or let's see what happens here. You move around the overworld. There's some puzzles and interactions in the overworld that you have. You know, each of your three characters has a different ability. Your bee can throw like a boomerang. The beetle has a big horn on its head and it can like slice through things. And the moth can freeze water droplets, and so you can kind of move through some environmental puzzles. And then those three attacks also become your standard attack in battle. That you can, you know, enemies will maybe be underground and you have to pop them up with the ice block from underground, or they'll be in the air and you have to knock them down with the boomerang. There's different special attacks that feel, and it has that same kind of Paper Mario RPG type of system where your button timing in terms of getting the right button times for additional damage or for blocking an attack. It's so there's nuance there. Like it is not simply something that you can just grind through. You have to, each of the boss battles, going back to our boss battle discussion, we were fighting the kind of the boss battle of the second chapter the other night, and I was, skimming by and finished it with 2 or 3 health left on each of my characters after using up all my healing items, and kind of burned through my inventory and knew that I could just kind of sneak it out. And so there's some pretty good strategic battle systems here. The only knock is there are sometimes, because of the environmental puzzles and transversal things, that because of the art style of the 2D or the flatness of things, sometimes judging distance or angle isn't always precise. But that's a small nitpick on a relatively relatively perfectly executed game. It's trying to do exactly what it is. It doesn't necessarily reinvent a whole lot, but it advances it. It's got a beautiful soundtrack. I spent my morning at work listening to the soundtrack, doing my work. So it feels like a Nintendo game. So it's out on all platforms. It's been out on Steam since December, but just released last week on the 3 consoles. Last week I was thinking about picking up a big RPG with the release of Xenoblade, and this was up as well, and I'm so glad that I picked this up for $25 or so. So really enjoyable.
All right, so let's move on to talk about strategy gaming a little bit. Swiss, you had a very unique, eclectic pick out of the group with Banished on PC.
Yeah, I think a friend at work recommended the game, and so I threw it in my wish list at some point on Steam, and I think the next day it went on sale, but it was like $6 on sale, so I picked it up, and I finally got around to playing it. So the best description I can give it is like Age of Empires 2 economy management meets SimCity. And so this it's made by Shining Rock Games, and I'd never heard of them. And I did a little research, and it's a one-man team. So he made this game out of a labor of love, and it's actually quite polished for just this guy working on it for the last several years. But you start out, the concept is you are some settlers that have been banished or exiled, and you're starting your new home. So on medium difficulty, you have like a storage barn and a little bit of rock and wood collected, and you have to build up your town and not die. So I played through the tutorial, and then I started my first town, and everybody starved to death. So I realized maybe I should prioritize food acquisition next time, and I'm working on another town now. But it's pretty detailed. So you have a very SimCity. Okay, I'm saying SimCity, but I haven't really played a SimCity game since SimCity 2000. So just that's my mentality here. SimCity-esque interface. Plant a farm there, plop some houses down, and those feel very much like Age of Empires 2 house building. You have your little tile, you smack the house down, and then you have to wait for the builders to build it up. And it felt very much like Age of Empires 2 there, but like some of the like building crops and stuff felt very SimCity-esque. And
have you played any of the games in the Caesar or Pharaoh series?
No. This may be like kind of a mimic of that, but you have to make sure you have the wood and the stone and the iron and food, and there's systems upon systems, because when you have that, like, I can build a fishing dock on the river to acquire food, but then you have to assign some of your citizens to be fishermen, and you can move them from job to job. But if I only have 12 adults in my town, I can't have 15 people, all 12 of them working on wood cutting. They're going to starve because they're not stockpiling food for the winter. I also need somebody to make sure that they're chopping the wood into for use to heat homes, because otherwise people will freeze in the winter. And so there's a lot of little things. You can build an herbalist to make sure your people are healthy, and so it's pretty good. There's even like a whole trading mechanism, because alls I have was cabbage seeds and pumpkin seeds. So my current town's not very healthy because all they're eating is fish, cabbage, and pumpkins right now. And so it was kind of, I like it. I'm actually impressed and inspired, because my geek dream someday, if I ever have the time, it'd be fun to make an indie game, I think. And I'm seeing a guy's labor of love here, and it's simple. It's not simple. There's a lot of systems, but it's not a huge sprawling game. This is what it is. This is the implementation. This is the simulation, and you just can go to town with it. But it's done pretty well. So I'm enjoying it.
So there's no combat or anything like that, right? It's more of a kind of a chill game where you're just kind of building up your town or your village.
Yeah, and I think there are disasters. I think you can have a fire or something. So I tried to start this town with, in anticipation of this. Eventually, I started building stone houses, but I was hitting limitations on stone and iron supplies. So
yeah, the Caesar series of games, at least, I didn't get a chance to look up Pharaoh, but was published by Sierra. Specifically Sierra Online, which I think was just a subdivision of Sierra, which was, of course, was owned by Vivendi. It brought us all the sorts of games like, not Space Ace, but King's Quest, Space Quest, those types of games. Caesar was a city building game with a historical aspect and with military units. The last iteration of the game was in 2005 with Caesar 4, so there might be something worthwhile checking out. I'm going to try and burn through. We're going to try and get through these last three, since we're at an hour and a half right now. I played a little bit of World of Warships. So, same thing that it always is. What I'll comment on is what's really great with this game is, number one, I guess just because of the pacing, it lends itself to decent gameplay. It's a MOBA, so it lends itself, in my opinion, it lends itself to decent gameplay when there's no comms, unfortunately. I really wish I was on Discord with somebody to talk about it, because it kind of, again, as I've said before, begs for coordination. But when you don't have that, there's a lot of things that you can observe from what other people are doing to figure out how to work together. As I go up through the tiers, it has some really... the matches get better as you go up through the tiers and wind up being with more experienced players. The only other thing that I'll mention is I really appreciate how, in terms of monetization and the free-to-play model, what this game does is you can buy increments of its premium account. Everybody participates in the notion of a season as they drop new content in. Playing ranked matches only comes at a very relatively high level, tier 7, I think. But the other thing is that what I really like is that in order to access a premium account, which accelerates like how fast you earn XP and your rate of reward and that kind of thing, you can get into a premium account in increments of like 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 30 days. So you don't have to be obligated to buying a season pass and then going, well, how much do I have to play this game over the course of 3 months to feel like it justifies my expense. So had a great time with it. I love playing with some of the ships that are in world fleets that people don't play with. So I was playing most recently with the Asian class of ships, which not a lot of people play with, but has each country's ships has its own particular tactical advantage. So learning how to take advantage of that in combat is often rewarding, because you surprise people by showing up with a ship that they don't expect. DBQ, you had a chance to play Iron Man VSR in VR.
Yes, Iron Man VR, just the demo, because the demo's out right now. The game actually comes out in July. All I will say is, one, it made a believer out of me that this works. Camouflage did a great job with the controls. There's a lot of nuance to your hand jets and propulsion. And it feels almost like a VR shmup where you are the ship and you've got some fluidity to be able to move around and shoot things. Movement is great and just so much fun. I'll say a whole lot more about it because it sold me on it. It's going to be a day one purchase when it comes out or at least a week one purchase when it comes out in July. So
plays better than or worse than mechanically? Not worse than. Mechanically, which would you prefer to play, that or Anthem?
Oh, this.
Okay.
This is. I even thought about Anthem when I was playing it, and it's more fluid, and you actually feel like you're the one in control of the nuance because of the success of the VR aspects.
Have you also, since it came out about the same time as this demo was available, have you had a chance to look at the? I can't remember who did it. At the scrapped Avengers shooter game that was supposed to come out in 2011.
I have not seen the Avengers FPS game that kind of got leaked back out. No, I did not get a chance to look at that.
Yeah, I'd be curious if you had a chance to look at that and compare at least what you see of the Iron Man gameplay, how that compares to the current. And let's wrap up the show with a platformer, the only game in that genre played by only one member of the cast, Osiris Prime. How was your time with Cluster Truck?
Of sorts, yes. This is a very interesting game. It's kind of a physics-based, not an endless runner, because there actually is a goal within each level. But basically, you're just bouncing from truck to truck, basically in a first-person view, trying to get to the the end goal, which is I don't know, a mile or two, but down the road, whatever it is. But you have all these. The trucks are moving, and there's a bunch of trucks, and there's obstacles, and there's times where you have to like jump off, like there'll be like a bridge, and underneath that there's another roadway you got to jump off and jump into that. There's just like trees in the way, and the one I'm doing now is a lasers course, so there's different laser setups that you have to dodge and jump around. So it's just just kind of a sit down, I'll play for 5-10 minutes and move on. And I'm playing this on the Xbox. This is made by Landfall Games. They made Tabs, which is another kind of quirky physics-based game, total accurate.
So like your battle simulator.
Yep. They made Stick Fight the game, which I've if you ever seen like those animations like online where the two stick fighters are doing all these like kung fu and ridiculous moves and stuff. So they made a game of that. And the publisher is Tiny Build, which they published another game I actually played the last show, Total Reliable Delivery Service. So kind of I'm playing all these games from pretty much the same developer publisher, but it's pretty cool. It's just kind of a fun game to jump in and play a few levels. So it's fun. I suggest recommend playing it just for
Cluster Truck is a lot of fun. It's a quick little pickup, like you said. Yeah, I've played it on PlayStation and on Xbox, and it's usually on sale for like $5 or $7.
Yeah, kind of you get kind of that frustration like a Trials type of a game, where you're trying to time your jumps, and you can get power ups and stuff like that. I've got like a double jump and a dash move, and there's other kind of power ups you can get. So it's really fun.
Very cool. Let's go ahead and make preps to walk out of here. Next, Picks Plays. Audio in games has always fought the uphill battle of being more than a commodity. Among the other factors in recognizable game design, gamers just tend not to notice or be vocal about the sound design. But could you imagine Resident Evil 2 Remake without the atmosphere created by the audio? Or missing the footsteps in Fortnite, the sweeping scores in The Witcher 3? The sound of shots fired in Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Take some time to sit back and enjoy some of the best gaming audio that you want to heap praise on. For this assignment, I will be playing Gears of War Ultimate Edition for PC. I've always found enjoyable, although it's not necessarily won a lot of awards or whatever, but I always enjoy the audio track, the sounds of Gears of War. I'm going to go back to the original and play that on PC in preps for playing maybe some Gears 4 or Gears 5 later on this year. Prime is going to be playing Star Wars Battlefront 2. Boom, boom. The lightsaber sound. Other sounds made famous by the Star Wars series will be at the forefront of that. Swiss, I don't know what Octopath Traveler's audio is known for, but I'm very interested to hear about it when you report out in the next couple of weeks. Next week is a deep dive show hosted by Swiss with DBQ as co-host. We'll be going down to a two-person show, and hopefully they will be able to pound through the plethora of news that is out. Hopefully we will not get caught with trying to figure out what everybody's going to do about their game showcases and E3 substitutes as we head into next week, but we've got contingencies for that. Gentlemen, anything else to add to this show before we close things out? All right, well, thanks a lot. This has been enough to keep going. Episode number 146, the Gamer Experience Show, the GX Show for June 2020, Part 1. Until next time, take care of yourself. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like and come here to talk with us about the games that you love. Once again, I have been Agasically Stamus alongside DBQ Hams, Osiris Prime, and Swiss Guard. That's going to do it for us. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. We're out of here.